Good evening, and you are on 4ZZZ's Locked In. This is an interview with Damien Linnane from the publication Paper Chained. Now, if you're an inmate and you haven't seen a copy of Paper Chained, this is where you need to listen in, because this is accessible, not only just information, but a way to connect with other inmates through creative endeavors, writing, poetry, information and articles. This is the stuff that you guys should be in touch with. So I'm very happy to introduce Damien. Thank you for being on Locked In tonight, because the more connections we have, the better it is for the inmates, our very important prisoners, to know about what's happening within and externally of the system. So good evening, Damien.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be on the show.
Very cool. So, how did Paper Chained come about?
Yeah, good question. So, I was very frustrated when I was in prison because I was making all this art and writing, but I couldn't do anything with it. There was no place to share it at all. I asked around other prisoners. I'm like, do you know if there's like some kind of like creative outlet, like a magazine or something? And nobody had ever heard of them. Like a couple of people was like, what are you talking about? There's never been a prison magazine. And so I thought that was a huge shame. So I decided that when I got out, I was going to try and start up a prison magazine for art and writing. And this is a very good thing, but somebody beat me to it by a couple of months. Just as I was getting out, somebody was starting one up. And, rather than reinventing the wheel, I sent an email to her and I was like, I really wanted to, this is something I feel very strongly about. Do you need a hand? And she was like, yes, please, for the love of God, somebody, help me with this. And so for the next 4 years, I was like peripherally helping her with it, mostly like sourcing content, because it was very difficult to get the word out that we existed. And then after about 4 or 5 years, she said, Damien, you're the only person who's been with us the whole time. I can't do this anymore. Is there any chance you want to keep it alive? And I was very I knew I didn't have the time or the money to take that on, but I did anyway, because I knew how much, what difference it would have made to my mental health when I was in prison. So I took it on, and that ended up being a very good thing, because long story short, and I'm happy to tell the whole story, but eventually I got funding for that. So now I'm actually employed to make the magazine. So now it's pretty much my dream job. Every day I go and check the mail from people in custody, and I put the magazine together, and it's something I'm very passionate about.
And I that's amazing, getting funding to do anything. And some of the inmates will know how much I battle for funding as well for them, but just to get funding to support prisoners is just amazing in its own, let alone being an ex-prisoner on top. And that's a difficult struggle just day to day. It's a living experience. So on top of that, do you mind mentioning any of your own time served, what the conditions were like for you, the biggest impact of that upon you?
Yeah, so I was sentenced to 2 years in New South Wales at the end of 2015. My non-parole period was 10 months, so that's how long I was in for. And when I had no idea of the criminal justice system before I went in. I was 29? I think I was 29 when I went in, and I had no idea what to expect, and I just assumed I'd be able to study. I just finished a bachelor's degree before I went in, and I was like, worst case scenario, get a year in prison, and I'll just use it as a quiet place to start my master's. And it turns out New South Wales, at least at the time, and I'm pretty sure still today, is probably the most difficult state to study in. There was debate. Yeah, possibly, but it's very difficult in New South Wales. Basically, the educational officer told me, look, there's a computer room here, but because of staff shortages, I can only monitor it for 1 to 2 hours a week at most, and so and even then, obviously, there's no internet access, so you can't study externally with 2 hours computer access a week. There's no personal computers in cells, kind of thing. So I wanted therapy, partially to address why I went to prison in the first place, and then they told me that there was no therapy available under any circumstances, and so that's I started to have a bit of a panic, because I've always been this go and go person, and I realized that I'd have nothing to do for the entire sentence. So I started out of desperation, really. I'd always had this idea for this story in my head, so I started writing a novel by hand. It took me 5 months to finish the first draft, and that book's it's been published. It's called Scarred. It's a crime thriller. But I finished that after 5 months, and I didn't have the idea to do a second book. I've recently, my second book's actually coming out next month, but at the time I didn't have an idea for one. And so I started to teach myself to draw. And it turns out I'd never done anything like that before, but turned out to be something I had some natural talent at. And, before, 3 months later, there's a queue of people like wanting, me to draw likenesses of their, pets, kids. One guy even wanted me to draw his motorbike. But, so I was making all this art and writing, and that was what occupied my sentence. But like you said, it was very frustrating that, I could make all these great things. I could show it to people in the yard or my block or whatever, but, there was no way I could share any of that,
process for you of being able to write and paint, how did that feel for you inside your mind, processing where you were, the circumstances that brought you there, and how to move on from that?
Yeah, good question. I think mostly it was just a way to stay sane, really, like why I got into it. I just needed something basically as a distraction, really. Like, everybody else was, I was the only person in my block who didn't, not sure how things work in Queensland, but in New South Wales, if you want a TV, you have to rent one. It's like, $5 a week or something. And I was the only person in my block who didn't have one, because I've always found, TV quite mind numbing, and I wanted something that was more intellectually stimulating. So the novel was basically just self-education, and that was what the art was as well. It was a way to do something constructive so I could feel better about myself. And feel like I wasn't wasting. I didn't lose 10 months of my life. You hear people, like a lot of people say that, like, I lost this much time. I'm like, I don't actually feel that way, because I did something constructive. And that was basically what got me through my sentence. I'm like, I'm coming out of this with I'm going to write that book I always wanted to write, and now I'm going to have a new skill as well. So.
That was an interview with Sarah and Damien Linnane from Paper Chain. We'll have a little bit more of that probably week after next.